He sent a thumbs up emoji when I told him my father died. I stared at my phone, the screen burning into my hand. My heart was still raw, freshly torn open by the news I'd just sent out to the last person on the list, my dad's only brother, Gavin. I kept the message simple. Dad passed away this morning, funeral's Friday. I sent it out of duty, not expectation. We hadn't heard from him in years, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. A thumbs up emoji. That was it. No words, no emotion, not even a fake, sorry for your loss. Just that little yellow hand casually acknowledging that my father, the man who raised me, who gave me everything, was gone. In that moment, I wasn't just grieving. I was humiliated, angry. It was like someone had spit on my father's grave before we'd even put him in the ground. I showed the message to my daughter, Tessa, who was sitting beside me, quiet and still. She read it and blinked, then just whispered, "What kind of person does that?" I didn't have an answer. I just felt the burn spread up my chest and into my throat. My mother, Mira, was in the next room making funeral arrangements with shaking hands. I didn't have the heart to show her. My father, Randall James, wasn't just my dad. He was our anchor. A proud, stubborn man who never had much in the way of money, but took pride in what he did have. Our family and the land, 50 acres of Carolina forest and field that had been passed down from his father and his father before him. He protected that land like it was part of his soul. And Gavin hadn't set foot here in nearly 7 years. Not since their big falling out. Not since Dad told him never to come back. So maybe I shouldn't have expected anything different. Maybe I was foolish to even send that message. But it was the right thing to do. My father had always taught me that, do right even when it's hard. But this wasn't just hard, it felt like betrayal. A slap. A reminder that sometimes the people closest to you by blood can be the coldest. I tried to shake it off. We had more important things to deal with. My dad was gone. My daughter was grieving. My mom was breaking slowly in the background. And me? I was trying to hold everyone together, like always. But something about that emoji wouldn't let go of me. It sat there in my head, mocking me. I should have deleted it. I should have ignored it. But I didn't. I took a screenshot. And then I waited. For what, I didn't even know. Closure? Regret? A second message? None came, but a week later he showed up. No warning, no call, no explanation. Just pulled into our driveway in a shiny black car like it was any other day. Like he belonged here, wearing sunglasses and this slick suit, like someone from a commercial who thought he could buy his way into anything. He walked up to the porch, looked around, and said, "Long time, huh?" I felt my stomach turn. I wanted to scream, but Tessa stood behind me, gripping my hand. She didn't say a word, just watched him with eyes that saw everything. And that's when he dropped the bomb. "I'm here about the land," he said. The land, of course. He didn't come for my father. He didn't come for us. He came for what he thought he could take. I wanted to slam the door in his face, but I didn't. Not yet, because sometimes the best way to protect what's yours isn't by fighting with fists or screaming in anger. Sometimes you wait, you watch, and when the moment comes, you let the truth speak for itself. And as it turned out, my daughter Tessa was already 3 steps ahead of him. My name is Elira James. I'm 38, a single mother, and a high school counselor in a small town just outside Asheville, North Carolina. Life here moves slow with quiet roads and long sunsets, the kind of place where family names still matter and everybody knows your business. After my divorce 5 years ago, I moved back in with my parents to help take care of them, especially my dad, whose health had started to slide after his second heart attack. I didn't come back because I had to. I came because I wanted to, because this land, our land, is more than just property. It's where I grew up, where my daughter Tessa took her first steps, where my dad built our home with his own 2 hands. Every corner of it carries a memory, a birthday, a burn mark on the porch from a 4th of July sparkler, the treehouse Dad built for me and later fixed up for Tessa. It's the kind of place you don't walk away from, not if you care about your roots. My father, Randall James, was a man of few words and steady habits. He believed in early mornings, honest work, and never owing anybody a dime. He could be stubborn, Lord, was he stubborn, but he loved us deeply, even if he showed it in his own quiet way. When Tessa was little and afraid of thunderstorms, he would sit on the porch with her in a rocking chair, holding her until the lightning passed. That was who he was. Solid. Present. The kind of man who didn't say I love you out loud, but said it every day in everything he did. My mom, Mira, was always the calm to his storm. She's gentle, soft-spoken, and smart in ways people don't always notice. She knew when to speak and when to listen, and when to say absolutely nothing. She and Dad were opposites that fit together, and when he died, it was like part of her disappeared with him. But she stayed strong for me and for Tessa. And then there's Tessa. She's 14 now, all sharp wit and wide eyes, smarter than I ever was at that age. She's the kind of kid who picks up on things adults think they're hiding. She had a bond with her grandfather that was quiet but deep. They'd spend hours together walking the trails on our land, talking about trees, animals, the stars. She knew him not just as grandpa, but as a man. So when he passed, it hit her hard. It hit all of us hard, but Tessa, she closed in. She didn't cry much. Instead, she got quiet. She started writing in her notebook again, always in the same spot on the porch where she and Grandpa used to sit. I didn't push her. I knew she was grieving in her own way. What made it harder was that we had no time to truly grieve. There were arrangements to make, documents to sort, people to call, and me, I had to be the one to hold it all together. I had to be the strong one, for Mom, for Tessa, for the memory of my father. And then there was Gavin, my father's younger brother, the family's shadow. Gavin was always different, flashy, loud, ambitious in a way that didn't fit this place. He left home in his 20s, chasing money and fast success. They'd had their share of arguments over the years, but things got truly bitter after my grandfather died. There were rumors about land deals, missing paperwork, and my dad accusing Gavin of trying to sell part of the property behind his back. After that, Dad cut him off. I remember hearing the argument from the top of the stairs when I was a teenager. Dad shouting louder than I'd ever heard him, Gavin storming out with a duffel bag and a red face. We never saw him again. Until now. That thumbs up emoji was just the beginning. A small, stupid signal that Gavin hadn't changed. That he was still the same cold opportunist who saw relationships as transactions. So when he showed up on our doorstep, uninvited, unannounced, and with eyes already scanning the fields, I knew exactly why he was there. And I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The morning Gavin showed up, it was unusually quiet. No birdsong, no wind. Just a thick, hot stillness that clung to the house like a warning. I was on the porch with my mother and Tessa, sorting through condolence cards and half-empty casserole dishes. We were tired, not just from the funeral a few days earlier, but from the emotional weight of grief that settles into your skin and doesn't leave. That's when we heard the tires crunching down the gravel drive. A sleek black car, tinted windows, plates from out of state. I knew before I saw his face. Gavin stepped out of the car like he owned the place. He wore sunglasses, shiny loafers, and a pale blue shirt that looked like it had never seen dirt or sweat. His hair was slicked back, his jaw clean-shaven. And he had that look, the one I remembered from years ago, like the world was just waiting for him to take it. He sauntered up the steps, looking around like he was appraising the property. My mother stiffened beside me, and I felt Tessa's small hand grip mine under the table. "Well," he said with a hollow smile, "long time, huh?" I didn't return the smile. "What are you doing here?" "I came to pay my respects," he said, but there was no emotion in his voice. He barely glanced toward my father's favorite chair, the one we'd left empty since the funeral. "Bit late for that," my mother said coldly, not looking up from her knitting. He shrugged. "Got tied up with business, but hey, better late than never." Then his eyes landed on me, sharp and calculating. "We should talk about the land." And just like that, it was out there. No pretense, no mourning, just his real reason for being here. I felt my pulse spike. "What about it?" He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to me like it was a birthday card. "Dad left this for me years ago. It says I've got a right to half the property, just in case something happened to Randall." I opened it slowly, It was an old handwritten letter, yellowed and creased. No signature, no witness. Just a vague note about considering Gavin's future and keeping the family land in the bloodline. I handed it back. This isn't legal, it's not even dated. He shrugged again, that same smug smirk spreading across his face. Maybe not, but with the right lawyer, it's enough to make things complicated for you. Probate court tends to get messy when old family documents pop up. I stared at him, the grief in my chest slowly crystallizing into fury. You weren't there when he was dying. You didn't visit. You didn't call. You couldn't even be bothered to send a full sentence when I told you he passed. And now you want the land? He didn't flinch. You think emotion matters in court? All that matters is paper and leverage. Behind me, Tessa stood up. She didn't say anything, just walked into the house, her face unreadable. My mother kept knitting, her hands tighter on the needles. Gavin's presence was like a storm cloud that had rolled in and refused to leave. Over the next few days, he lingered. He started showing up at the county clerk's office, asking questions, smiling too much. I knew what he was doing, planting seeds of doubt, looking for loopholes, waiting for us to make a mistake. And I'll admit, I started to doubt myself. What if there was something we didn't know? Some old document, some forgotten agreement? Probate hadn't cleared yet. Technically, nothing was settled. I spent sleepless nights researching land laws, calling lawyers, digging through old files in my dad's shed. Tessa helped. She was quiet but alert, watching everything, piecing things together. One night, she came to me with something she'd found, an old ledger from Dad's study hidden at the back of a drawer. "Mom," she said, "this page was marked." It was a record of a meeting Dad had with a notary in 2003. Next to it, a line item that said Letter of Disinheritance, Gavin J. It didn't say where the letter was, but it existed. My heart slammed in my chest. I remembered that year, Dad and Gavin had fought bitterly. After that, Dad redrew his will and made it clear Gavin was out. We just had to find that letter, and I had a feeling Tessa already had an idea where it might be. The next morning, the sun rose behind a wall of clouds. There was a weight in the air, like the land itself was holding its breath. Gavin had left town for a day, supposedly to meet with a lawyer in Charlotte, but we all knew he'd be back. He wasn't going to walk away, not without trying everything he could to get his hands on what wasn't his. I stood at the kitchen sink, sipping black coffee and staring out the window at the back field, the place where my dad taught me how to ride a bike, the place where he showed Tessa how to track deer prints after a rainstorm. I couldn't let Gavin take that from us. Not legally, not emotionally, not in any way. Tessa came into the kitchen holding something in both hands, an old, dented file box, the kind my dad kept his most private documents in. It had been shoved behind a cabinet in the garage, tucked beneath a stack of rusted tools. "Is this it?" she asked. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the box. Inside were yellowed papers, worn envelopes, and a small leather-bound notebook. Near the bottom, wrapped in a folded dishcloth, was a sealed envelope with my father's handwriting across the front. "Only if Gavin returns." I held my breath. We opened it at the dining table, just me, Tessa, and my mother. Inside was a notarized letter signed and dated in 2003. My father's words were direct and impossible to misinterpret. Gavin was explicitly disinherited, not just from the land, but from any part of my father's estate. It even referenced the forged land agreement Gavin had once tried to use, proof my father had known what he was capable of. I looked up and saw something flicker in my mother's eyes, not sadness, but satisfaction. "He knew," she whispered. "Your father knew Gavin would try this." We sat in silence for a few minutes, the letter open on the table, the words heavy with history and betrayal. "We need to take this to the lawyer," I said, but Tessa shook her head. "Number not yet." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked down at the envelope again, her fingers tracing the edges. "He's coming back, right? He's going to try something. Let's wait until he shows up again. Let him walk in here all confident. Then we show him what Grandpa left." I studied her face. She wasn't scared. She was calm, focused. She reminded me so much of my father in that moment it made my chest ache. "All right," I said. "We'll wait." And we did. That week, Gavin returned like clockwork. He called first, said he wanted to settle things quickly, and that he'd be stopping by with his guy to present terms. My hands clenched when I heard the voicemail. He wasn't even pretending anymore. On the day of his visit, I told Tessa and my mom to let me handle it, but Tessa insisted. "I need to be there," she said. She dressed neatly, tucked the envelope into a folder, and sat at the kitchen table like she was waiting for a parent-teacher conference. Calm, unreadable. When Gavin pulled up, he was wearing another crisp suit, this one charcoal gray. He had a man with him, mid-40s, slim, probably a lawyer. They both walked in like they owned the place. Gavin greeted me with that same smirk. "I think we can all come to an agreement today." He laid out a folder of documents, terms, percentages, maps with red lines drawn across our land. My stomach turned just looking at them. But I didn't touch the folder. I looked at Tessa. She stood up, walked over to Gavin, and held out the sealed envelope. "You dropped this last time, right?" she said. Her voice was clear, steady. Gavin blinked, surprised. He took it, still playing it cool. He opened it, and that's when it happened. His expression changed instantly. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. The lawyer leaned in, reading over his shoulder. Within seconds, the man stepped back and said quietly, "We're done here." Gavin didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring at the letter like it was a death sentence. And in a way it was, because everything he came here for, everything he thought he could steal, had just slipped through his fingers. And my daughter, my quiet, brilliant daughter, had delivered the final blow. Gavin didn't move for a moment. He just stood there, clutching the letter like it might disappear if he held it tightly enough. His face was pale, his jaw tight, and his eyes darted from the page to me to Tessa, then back to the page again. I stayed quiet. Let the silence do the work. That letter, my father's final word on the matter, had stripped Gavin of every ounce of leverage he thought he had. It was legally binding, witnessed, notarized, and filed by the very man Gavin had once tried to deceive. There was no mistaking its intent. It was detailed, precise, and impossible to refute. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. James," he said stiffly, "this changes the conversation." "No," Gavin muttered, shaking his head. "There's got to be something. That note I brought, it's older, it has weight." "Not against this," the lawyer replied bluntly. "This was written later, it's properly witnessed, and it directly revokes any prior arrangements. We don't have a case." Tessa sat back down and crossed her arms, calm as ever. I watched Gavin unravel. He took a step back, the letter still in his hand, like he didn't quite believe what he was holding. "He couldn't do this. We had a deal." "No," I said quietly, finally speaking. "You thought you had a deal, but Dad knew who you were. He knew what you'd try, and he made sure you couldn't touch what he built." His face twisted, part fury, part disbelief. "He had no right to cut me out." "He had every right," I said. "He gave you chances. You burned every one." The lawyer closed his folder and looked at Gavin. "I suggest we leave." Gavin turned to me, eyes narrowing. "You think this is over?" I didn't flinch. "It was over the minute you sent that emoji." He stared at me, searching for some way to regain control, some thread he could pull to unravel the foundation beneath my feet. But there wasn't one. There never had been. My father had made sure of that, and Tessa, my daughter, had finished the job. As they left, Gavin paused on the porch and turned back one last time. "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. I just closed the door, and for the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. Inside, Tessa looked up at me and said, "Grandpa knew him better than anyone." I nodded, swallowing hard. He did. Later that evening, we took the letter and placed it in the fireproof box my dad kept under his bed. Not because we needed to keep it safe anymore, but because it belonged there, with the other important things Dad had protected over the years. We sat outside as the sun set over the field, the same field Gavin thought he could carve up and sell. But this land, it wasn't just property. It was memory. It was sacrifice. It was a father's final stand to make sure his legacy lived on in the right hands. I looked at Tessa and saw him in her, the same quiet strength, the same steady fire. And I knew in that moment that everything he had hoped for, everything he had fought for, hadn't been in vain. Because we weren't just guarding land. We were protecting a promise, and we had kept it. The weeks after Gavin left passed with an almost eerie calm. No more surprise visits, no more thinly veiled threats or paperwork in the mail. It was like a storm had rolled in, rattled everything loose, and then disappeared as quickly as it came. We had weathered it, not with lawyers or rage, but with truth, and with the quiet kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard. We finalized the probate with no challenges. The lawyer reviewed everything and said what I already knew. My father had covered every angle. Every document was in order, every wish clearly expressed. He had protected us, even from beyond the grave. I found myself standing alone on the porch one morning, coffee in hand, watching the sun stretch its fingers across the field. The grass moved gently in the breeze, and I could almost hear my dad's voice in it. Not words exactly, just presence. That steady, grounding energy that had always made this place feel like home. Tessa joined me not long after, still in her pajamas, her notebook tucked under one arm. She didn't say anything at first, just leaned on the railing beside me and looked out across the land. "Do you think he's proud of us?" she asked quietly. I turned to her, heart full. "I know he is." She nodded, then opened her notebook. "I want to write about it," she said. "Not just what happened, but everything. Grandpa, what this land means, what it means to keep a promise." I reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then write it. He'd want you to tell the truth." That night, we planted a tree near the bench where Dad used to sit. A small oak. Tessa picked it out herself, said it would grow strong roots like him. We placed a little wooden sign at the base that read, "The Witness." It was more than just a tree. It was a marker, not for death but for memory, for resilience, for the day my daughter faced a man twice her size and didn't blink. I think about Gavin sometimes, not with hate, just clarity. Some people walk through life thinking they can take what they want. That family is a tool, not a bond. That legacy is something to be seized, not earned. But what my father taught me and what I've now taught my daughter is that real legacy isn't in the things we leave behind. It's in how we protect what matters. It's in the people we raise to stand tall when the wind hits hard. And it's in the promises we keep long after the world stops watching. So to anyone out there fighting to hold on to what's rightfully theirs, to anyone facing someone who thinks power can replace love, remember this. You don't need to yell to be strong. You don't need to strike first to win. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is handing someone an envelope and letting the truth do the talking. Because when all is said and done, justice doesn't always wear a robe or carry a gavel. Sometimes she wears muddy sneakers, carries a notebook, and calls you mom. And she never forgets who dropped what or where.